As we get into the remarkable treatise on painting of Shitao, um, in the last week of class here, in my Daoism class, um, I thought I would sort of go back and collect some thoughts from the previous texts, or really the pre-Buddhist Taoist texts, um, on bearing on the arts and sort of constructing a Taoist aesthetic. Now, I think really uh, Taoism gives you many wonderful ways to think about the arts, profound ways, and this is one of the central ways that it's been applied um, in everything from the poetry that we've been looking at in Stonehouse and Cold Mountain, um, in Chinese landscape painting, where it is profoundly expressed, perhaps in some ways more profoundly expressed than it is in the texts. And again, we wouldn't find that surprising, would we, considering the limitations that Taoists, beginning with Lieh Tzu, um, think that words labor under. Images might labor under. They do labor under their own kinds of limitations, but um, and but okay. So for one thing, the artistic process is a good way to think about Wu Wei, and that is the way, for example, I think Shitao thinks about the artistic process. Action in identification with one's environment, with one's situation. Uh, Action that does not proceed from a separable self. Although Shitao is a famous individualist, and that's a wonderful combination too, and that you really found in Taoism as well. Overall, it's going to be that's hard to tease out. Of course, we're quite a bit later here. Stonehouse to this is 400 years. Is that right? Something like that. And but in some ways, the development is pretty consistent. Now, Shitao too, I think, gives you a pretty pure Taoism. You know, like there's not that much of an admixture of Buddhism here, for what that's worth. And maybe it just shows you that's at least still possible. We've been discussing the Chan expressions of, or extensions of Taoist thought, or the Chan synthesis of Taoism and Buddhism. But this is a pretty pure mainline thing. I mean, just to give you a flavor of this, what a great painter Shitao is. One of the loosest and most spontaneous and painterly ink painters you'll ever see. And so he gets some authority from that, just the excellence of his painting, as commonly agreed upon. I'll link a bank of images. WikiArt has a excellent bank of 80 images of Shitao's paintings in good reproductions. This is a self-portrait. You can't really see how delightful it is. I should have like sophisticated video production, but I don't. Okay. So anyway, just a little flavor of Shitao. Fire Bitter Melon on Painting, translated by Lin Yutang. There have been a couple other translations. I'd still like to see something more definitive. I like this one though. It gives it's loose, which is at least good. I think it could be better expressed conceptually in a way in English. But anyway, this is just the way this treatise starts out. The one-stroke method. The one-stroke method. That's what this whole thing is about. The one-stroke method. And really, it's just, what he's asserting essentially is that all painting comes down to putting the brush on the, putting the ink brush, in this case, on the canvas, uh, and making a stroke. And then really a whole universe can emerge. Everything from a little bug, a Zhuangzi-like mantis, uh, to a vast mountain range or the sky, from a single stroke. The one comes from the Tao, but everything else comes from the one. So in a way, it's like it's a kind of direct application of Tao Te Ching cosmology to the art of painting. It's an analogy of painting to the creation of the universe. But maybe we should just talk for a second about what kind of analogy. In the primeval past, there was no method. The primeval chaos was not differentiated. When the primeval chaos was differentiated, method or law, I'm not sure where it's at, Lieh, was born. How was this method born? It was born of the one stroke. This one stroke is that out of which all phenomena are born, applied by the gods and applied by man. People of the world, it should be, I think, do not know this, it says word. Therefore, this one-stroke method is established by me. The establishment of this one-stroke method creates a method out of no method. And of course, the Tao is the way that is no way. There's not a way. Or, when Confucius talks to the guy who jumped into Luliang Falls, he says, like, what is your Tao? How do you do that? Come out of that unscathed and singing. And he goes like, I have no way, actually. The Tao of no Tao. Wu Wei. The establishment of this one-stroke method creates a method out of no method, and a method which covers all methods. And so the whole universe is pictured as art, okay? Like the way that Shitao creates a painting is the way the universe emerges. He appears actually confused between those two things. Of course, that's intentional. That's really the point of this thing. The artistic process is the same as the process of by which the universe as a whole emerges, which is Wu Wei. Okay. One term for it, anyway. Even as one makes a distant journey by starting with the first step, so this one stroke contains in itself the universe and beyond. Thousands and myriads of strokes and ink all begin here and end here, waiting only for one to take advantage of it. A man should be able to show the universe in one stroke. And now you will recall the Enso. His idea clearly expressed, the execution well done. If the wrist is not responsive, then the picture is not good. Straight from like this is what the universe is, to here's how you paint, make sure your wrist is loose. Okay. I'm trying to think of anything in the West that quite rocks it at this level, like the metaphysics and the painting instruction. With a casual stroke, hills and streams, casual stroke, all life and vegetation and human habitations take their form and gesture. The scene and the feeling connected with it cannot caught, hidden, or exposed. People do not see how such a painting is created, but the act of drawing never departs from the understanding mind. We're always drawing, insofar as we understand. For since the primeval chaos became differentiated, the one-stroke method was born. Since the one-stroke method was born, all objects in the universe appeared. Okay, and it goes on from there. And there's I'd say there's a little bit of a comic touch here. Now, in the West and in the monotheistic traditions, God is sometimes pictured as the artist of the universe. And then, Michelangelo or whatever, actually, like Vasari does this basically, like says like, has a godlike creativity. Like the force that makes Michelangelo do the Sistine ceiling is like the creative force that makes God, that allows God to create the universe. This, though, is not that. The universe is created spontaneously. Yokro Kwosan. Created spontaneously, improvisationally, with no purpose, reflecting no mind, with no intention, okay? And that is what the artistic process ought to be, at any rate. All right? It's improvisational at its strongest, and yet ordered, beautifully ordered, perhaps, because ordered in sort of in a Wu way confluence with the universe. So the artists in the West are often pictured as having hyper intense agency, hyper intense intentionality. You're Beethoven, like it's emerging from your brain and it's your expression and you're a master and you're a genius. Shitao probably thinks of himself as a genius in a certain way, but it's a genius it's the opposite of a kind of egocentric genius, the way we picture maybe a Picasso, right? Or, I don't know, James Joyce. I don't know, Joyce is an interesting case. But, all right, so I just thought I'd go back and recover a few passages that bear on this picture that Shitao gives of the artistic process as an image of what the whole universe is and as a ideal of human action through Wu Wei. All right, so here's a couple passages. I mean, these are things we probably talked about. Certainly this one. Here's one from the Zhuangzi, which many people have taken as a beautiful guide for doing art. The Zhuangzi, in particular. Ting, cook Ting. Ting the cook was cutting meat free from the bones of an ox for Lord Wenhui. His hands danced as his shoulders turned with the step of his foot and the bending of his knee. With a shush and a hush, the blade sang following his lead, never missing a note. Certainly an artist at work. Or a craftsman, that works too. We have to think about what those distinctions could amount to in the Chinese context, art craft distinction. Ting and his blade moved as though dancing to the Mulberry Grove, some beautiful song, or as if conducting the Jingshu with a full orchestra. Lord Wenhui exclaimed, "What joy! It's good, is it not, that such a simple craft can be so elevated?" And this is a central expression of Wu Wei, but I'm saying it's also like a, interesting way to describe the artistic process. Ting laid aside his knife. All I care about is the way. I find it in my craft, that's all. When I first butchered an ox, we're using Hamill and Seaton's translation. When I first butchered an ox, I saw nothing but ox meat. It took me 3 years to see the whole ox. Now I go out to meet it with my whole spirit and don't think only about what meets the eye. Sensing and knowing stop. The spirit goes where it will, following the natural contours. And now you could describe this as a technique for landscape painting. And it's not surprising that maybe Chan Buddhism and Daoism led to the invention of landscape painting hundreds of years before it happened in the West, for instance. The spirit, say the spirit of the painter, for example, goes where it will, following the natural contours, revealing large cavities. But now back to the butcher, sorry. Leading the blade through openings. This could be a brushstroke too. Moving onward according to actual form, yet not touching the central arteries or tendons or ligaments, much less touching bone. A good cook needs to sharpen his blade but once a year. He cuts cleanly. An awkward cook sharpens his knife every month. He chops. I've used this knife for 19 years, carving thousands of oxen. Still, the blade is as sharp as the first time it was lifted from the whetstone. At the joints, there are spaces, and the blade has no thickness. And actually, Shitao says things like this about the brush, too. Entering with no thickness where there is space, the blade may move freely where it will. There's plenty of room to move. Thus, after 19 years, my knife remains as sharp as it was the first day. Even so, there are always difficult places, and when I see rough going ahead, my heart offers proper respect as I pause to look deeply into it. Attend to it, the subject matter, the oxen that you're carving, the landscape that you're depicting. Look to attend to it deeply. Then I work slowly, moving my blade with increasing subtlety, until kerplop! The meat falls apart like a crumbling clod of earth. I then raise my knife and assess my work until I'm fully satisfied. Then I give my knife a good cleaning and put it carefully away. All right. Like I say, potentially a nice aesthetic guide. There are many examples. You could annex the whole book as a guide to painting or writing poetry. It is a beautiful piece of literature, too. It's written artistically. Unlike most classics of philosophy, really. Okay. This is in one of the outer chapters, I guess. Where is this? In chapter 17. I don't know if we looked at this one. Then Yan Hui said to Confucius, this is a dialogue between Confucius and his favorite disciple, as interpreted by a Daoist. When I was crossing the rough, dangerous waters at Changshen, this is Yan Hui talking to Confucius, the ferryman handled the boat like a spirit. So I asked him, can one learn to handle a boat like this? And he replied, it can be done. Many good swimmers have the ability to handle a boat. And then there are your divers. They can do it before they've ever even seen a boat. I asked him for more, but he wouldn't say. Dare I ask him to explain? Dare I ask you to explain? Confucius answered, that many good swimmers can do it is because they've forgotten water, because they're in it. It's a matter of handling a boat beautifully is a matter of knowing the water so well that you're completely comfortable with it and identified with it in a certain way. Not separate from it. I don't know if you know this feeling, swimming. I'm not a great swimmer myself, but I mean, the human body is mostly water, so let it flow, baby. As for divers being able to master boating before they ever seeing a boat, well, they look at the rough and dangerous depths as you would look on a Highland cart track. An overturned boat is no more to them than a stuck cart is to you. Stuck or tipped over. When it's something you've seen 10,000 times before, it's not something that really gets to you. So you can go on without fear. I mean, there's a certain, everyday common sense quality that comes through, that punches through over and over again in this cosmic metaphysical frame. Shooting for chips, Confucius continued, like for a no prize or, like a just symbolic prize, shooting for that with a bow. A man might show great skill with the bow. For a brass buckle prize, a prize of a brass buckle, he'll try to keep it simple and take aim. Start him shooting for good yellow gold, and he might as well be blind. His skill remains the same, but as his attention turns to the prize, externals intrude. When externals intrude, what's internal can get twisted. Okay, and so one thing I would focus on there is the relation of process and product in the artistic realm. This is one way to think about art. Art is a devotion to process that yields for its own sake, process for its own sake. And all these images of craftsmen and artists have that quality in these Taoist texts. Cook Ting is devoted to the process. not to the steak or the cash. But that's who you want to get your steak from, and probably the people who are showering him with cash, actually. But that's because he's devoted to the process, not the product. Like I say, that's an interesting way to think about art, and that's certainly the way Shih T'ao thinks about it. And this is very process-evident art. You can see the strokes in a way that many Western painters try to efface the process, although many explored the process too explicitly. You can see the strokes in Rembrandt, for instance, or Monet. You can see how it was made. The process is crystallized in the object, in Pollock, famously, etc. All right. Now, Book 5 of the Lieh Tzu, using Wang's version, is largely about music, which is so central to Confucianism, for example. But again, it gives beautiful expressions of like a Daoist approach to the artistic process, and that as an analogy to human action in general, and that as an analogy to the universe in general, the creative process of the universe. Wang says this in introducing, this is Book 5, Part 5 of the Lieh Tzu. The key to understanding the natural order of things is dissolving the barrier between subject and object, knower and known, seer and seen. Whether you are learning archery, fishing, driving, singing, crafting an artifact, playing a musical instrument, or communicating with a friend, the highest level of achievement can only be reached when dualities are dissolved and nothing separates you from everything and everyone. Again, Wu Wei, or the artistic process, or Daoism in general, right? Okay, maybe a passage or two from this. This is 55, chapter 55 of the Lieh Tzu. Musician Wen learns to play the lute. A long time ago, there was a musician who could charm birds and fish into dancing with his music. It's an ancient image in the West as well, that kind of thing. A painting so good it fools the birds into pecking at the grapes. A lute player named Wen from the kingdom of Cheng heard the story and went to acquire the skill. So he left his family and went to study with the master musician, Shang. For a long time, Wen could not play anything. His fingers were tied up in knots, and every time he picked up the lute, he could not bring himself to play. After 3 years, he had learned nothing. You might as well go home, his teacher said. I don't know if you know this feeling, picking up an instrument. Wen put down his lute, sighed, and said, "It's not that I haven't learned any songs or that I can't tune my instrument properly. I cannot play from my heart, so the music has never become part of me. That's why I can't bring myself to play. Let me rest a bit and see what happens." "How are you getting along with your music?" his teacher asked. Not long afterward, Wen returned. How are you getting along?" "I think I've experienced a breakthrough. Let me show you." Wen took his lute and gently touched a string called autumn. You can find out about Chinese lutes a little bit if you like. Although it was springtime, a cool wind blew. The leaves crackled in the autumn breeze, and the sky was bright and cloudless. Then in autumn, he touched the string called spring, and a gentle wind came. Warm rains fell and flowers bloomed. In the middle of summer, Wen touched the string called winter, and suddenly the snow fell and the rivers froze. When winter came, he touched the string called summer. Immediately the sun shone fiercely, the snow disappeared, and ice melted from the rivers. Finally, he touched the last string and played all of them together. A refreshing wind blew. Azure clouds floated overhead. Sweet dew fell, and fragrant springs bubbled up from the ground. The master musician of Sheng clapped his hands and exclaimed, "Your music far surpasses what words can describe. The greatest players will have to learn from you now." Wen was already an accomplished musician by the time he went to study with Shang, but he realized that perfection in technique alone does not make great music. when he was finally able to dissolve the duality between himself and the music, the songs he played not only had the power to create moods, but literally changed reality. You could think of the arts as processes of identification, merger with the materials you're using, with the world you're depicting, and maybe with the people with whom you're communicating as well. There's a couple lovely expressions of that in Lieh Tzu 5. Well, I don't know if I'll hit all that, but let's. So the art as communication, and communication as a breaking down of difference, a breaking down of the distinction between the things that are communicating, intensifying their connection that in a way that eats into their skins, into the barriers between them, makes them begin, or shows them not to have ever been distinct. One more passage. This is 58, just the last paragraph of 58, about a robot and stuff like this, or like an automaton that someone produced. Looking back on King Mu's robot is a very modern word in Western languages, or 20th century anyway. So you could think about that as a translation of any ancient Chinese term. Can we really say it is artificial? The robot was made of materials found in nature. Leather, bark, and hemp. And, so is a painting. Maybe, right? Or yes. Humans are also made of the same stuff as nature. For all things emerge from the gathering of yin and yang vapors and owe their existence to the primordial breath of the Tao. Whether something is real or artificial depends on how we view the materials from which it is made. If this is the case, then as real persons, what makes us more privileged than other things in creation? So look, we're all made of the same stuff. And my paintings are no more artificial than those mountains out there. That's definitely what Shih T'ao is saying. One thing he's saying. Like, I'm a natural phenomenon. Breathing this air that I'm also depicting, eating the vegetables that grow in this ground. We're not distinct. And to experience that is, to kind of access the highest level of art, or the greatest possibility of art. And that certainly makes art just a Daoist, could be a Daoist spiritual discipline or a form of meditation. All right, and also a form of communication. Because Shitao is not just sitting alone going like this. He's making paintings, and people are seeing those paintings, and they're understanding something about the Tao and the universe from those paintings. All sorts of barriers, lines, borders are being breached. Just a couple passages from the Wu Wei Jing and Guo Song. The flow of nature is melodic, both inevitable and spontaneous. Confucius uses those kinds of metaphors too, like just thinking about the universe as art, and vice versa. Some people try incredibly hard to be great artists. This is number 3 in my numbering. But great artists become artists without even knowing how. Like, you're not going to be able to do this merger with the universe, art as Wu Wei, by intending to, by trying harder to, etc. Some people try hard to be wise, but people become wise without trying. We can't even become fools or dogs by trying. Much less great landscape painters, I guess. And okay, this number 59 here does not necessarily bear on arts directly, but I want to give this the broadest frame to finish off. What does not exist cannot produce things that exist. How then is existence possible? Things spontaneously produce themselves. That's really all there is to metaphysics. The self cannot produce things, and it cannot be produced. I mean, if you really tried to think about art through that structure, the self cannot produce things, and it cannot be produced. I don't, you know, you the narrative of Western art history and great artists is just not going to run in this direction. This is a radical challenge, in a way, to the way we think Westerners have thought about art. Things are not created intentionally. The self exists for itself, in itself, simply in virtue of being what it is. That means that there are no overall explanations, because the principle of existence and action in each thing is that thing and emerges spontaneously. The word Tian, nature or heaven, means the spontaneity or play of things, not the blue sky, though the sky too might be a place to play. And Shitao definitely is playing in the sky. Maybe play is art too. Friedrich Schiller thought so. One more week.